Okay. Good afternoon, folks. How you doing, Mr. Suarez?
Doing well, Doc.
Lieutenant Suarez. My bad.
Good.
Okay. All right. So we're gonna get ready to start this economics class.
Do they all have the workbooks?
Mm-hmm. All right, good afternoon, folks. How y'all doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing fine, thank you. All right, so today we're going to talk about political economy and economics, and it's in your journals. So if you look on the section, page 37 of your workbook, okay? Everybody there? Okay, so for those of you in Facebook land, this is my my middle, early college, high school class, and the course is Economic Systems. And today's class, we're talking about political economy and economics. And also the idea of a paradigm change in the 21st century. Okay, so I don't know if you want to ask me anything or how you want to play this.
No, I think you're flowing.
Okay. Okay. All right. So as I mentioned last week, we talked about epistemology and the idea that people and institutions justify their beliefs in a particular way, and what that opened up the door for me is that it made me more comfortable in pursuing an alternative paradigm. So again, I was trained in mainstream economics, and the mainstream economics were neoclassical economics, Keynesian economics, and even Marxian economics. Those were my mainstream economics. And so, and as I continue, so Mr. Perla, so if you could just fill the chats, and if there's any questions with regards to what I'm talking about.
What page are you on in the workbook, Dave? They wanted to know.
Page 37.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Okay. So this idea of political economy, again, when I was at the University of Massachusetts, I studied mainstream economics, but one of the weaknesses was that I felt that the material did not cover, what I was studying did not cover what I was experiencing. Right? So, I was studying mainstream economics, neoclassical economics, Keynesian economics, even Marxian economics, but the life that I lived in was, I lived in a world that was filled with segregation. And again, if you remember from my last presentation, right, I grew up, my teenage years, I grew up in Europe, and I went through, when I came to the United States, I went through a cultural shock. Because the issue of race was so significant and so tense in the United States of America. And as a result of that cultural shock, I made a decision that I wanted to study the issue of race, right? And study why there was segregation in the United States of America. Study why, there are so many ghettos in the United States, and those ghettos were primarily black and brown skinned people. And then even in there were poor white communities in the cities that I lived in too, right? But that segregation and how intense the concepts of race were, that just really blew my mind. And while at UMass, I met a professor, Lloyd Hogan, right? He was teaching at Hampshire College, and he introduced me to this concept or his work in with the book that he wrote was called Principles of Black Political Economy. And studying the principles of black political economy, it really gave me a solid perspective with regard to what's happening in this perception of race and class in America. And so here in Buffalo, I've worked with it for a while. I have a pretty good understanding of the issues of race and class in America. And now, while I'm teaching in the high school level, I'm trying, the theoretical work I did, again, was black political economy. The policy work that we built on was cooperative economics, and the applied work is called community building economics. So now, in the 21st century, I think that the framework of black political economy is a very solid framework, and the work and the innovations that I've done are very solid innovations that can speak to the time periods of the 21st century. Now, from our class on Monday, any of you remember what the postulates were? What do we postulate about human beings? That's my question to the class. Remember the postulates, the assumptions that we can all agree upon.
Everybody needs water, food, life, air.
Okay. All right. So yeah, that in terms of the material means of our survival. So if you remember, I was saying that political economy in the simplest terms is about people, and that economics in the simplest terms is about food, right? But like dealing with the idea of epistemology, we recognize that all these different people have these different perspectives, but the bottom line, right, no matter what your perspective, if human beings are to survive, we have to figure out how to put food on the table, right? We have to figure out how to secure our daily bread. And our economic analysis facilitates that. So the way we build the political economic analysis is that we postulate, right? We have three main postulates, right? And the three main postulates are that human beings exist. And is that something we could all agree upon, class? Let me see if you get a thumbs up on that. I mean, we talked about this before, right? Okay. And then we also postulated that the material means of survival exist. Is that right too? Okay. Yeah. Okay. And then we also postulated that there's some kind of distributional mechanism that get the people, right, from their households into the work sites, and some kind of distributional mechanism that gets the material means of survival, the food from the work sites, into the hands of the people. Okay, so our analysis, we start with that postulate, right? And real quick, the definition of political economy, the one that I use, the one that I developed through the work of Lloyd Hogan, is that political economy is the study of a human population undergoing the act of social reproduction over a protracted period of time under a set of rules promulgated and enforced by a political state within a bounded geographical domain. Now again, I realize that that's a handful. That's a lot, right? But if we just assume and recognize that political economy is about people and how they socially reproduce, economics is about food and the material means of survival, and then we could talk about the distributional mechanism. Okay, so that's the foundation. So if you go to so what we're going to talk about today, right, is specific kinds of political economies. So if you go to page 40, the special types of political economies, do you see, are you moved to that section?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So, what are the political economies? So, if we start with the idea of communal hunter-gatherer, right? So what we're saying in our analysis, we're trying to, like mainstream economics, a lot of them, like if you take economic, or when you take economics classes in college, right, a lot of them don't, a lot of the economic analysis doesn't go back into history, okay? So the assumption is, like right now we live in a capitalist political economy, and it's almost like the assumption is that capitalism has always been around, and it always has been around, and it always will be around. But the truth of the matter is that the way people have socially reproduced over time, the way they have secured their daily bread over time, and the distributional mechanisms have been different, right? So let's say we talk about the communal hunter-gatherer economy and the communal political economy. So the political economy, we're talking about that, when we talk about communal, and what do you think I mean by communal? Somebody speak on that. Anybody in the chat there, Kyle, talking about communal?
Not yet.
No, yet? Okay. So communal is kind of...
I mean, I can help that a little bit.
Yeah, please.
Think about the base word commune.
Mm-hmm.
What is that part of? And then someone just said a group of people.
Okay. Yeah, so...
Olivia said a group of people. Ariel said community.
Right. So the vast majority of time that human beings have been on the planet, the way they were organized has been communal, right? Meaning that, you know, it was a village lifestyle, right? No real hierarchy. You know, you had your village elders, right? But the way they socially reproduced was a, you know, egalitarian kind of way, a communal kind of way. And the way they secured their daily bread was hunting and gathering, right? So if, you know, if one of the great hunters in the village was able to go out and get a water buffalo, right? They brought the water buffalo back to the village, and it's a communal village, right? How was, you know, so now we've talked about the distributional mechanism. How was the food of the water buffalo, how was it distributed, class? How do you think it was distributed? We have a communal village, right? You bring in some food back to the village. How is it distributed? I mean, like, did the hunter come
Guys,
back?
If you want to look on page 41, it talks about communal hunter-gatherer economy and kind of based off that. It's not on page 40.
Right, okay. Well, I mean, is the hunter going to say, well, you got to buy this food from me? Anybody? What do you think?
Didn't they do trades?
Well, if you're all in the same village. Well, I mean, in part, they really didn't have money during that time period. So that's another thing.
Wasn't it more like sharing is caring? So like you share with the village kind of evenly out?
Yeah. So if the hunter was to bring the food back, right, then the food was shared, right? What's that?
Like specified jobs, like some people will hunt, some will water.
Right. And it came back and it was all, you know, the idea of all for one and one for all. Now, sometimes the food would be distributed to the hunters first because they had to go back and hunt, but sometimes the food was distributed to the youth first, okay? But the bottom line is that this is a discussion of political economy and economics, but without a discussion of money. And the distributional mechanism associated with that kind of political economy and economics was, hey, we just shared it, right? It was distributed in a way that the village elders and the people of the village felt was fair, okay? And for the vast majority of time that we were on the planet, right, the human beings that have been on the planet, that was the political economy, and that was the economics. But then over years, right, so if you notice again on page 41, we use as time, it said we use a timeline with a year as a marker. You know, the man has possibly been on the planet for 11 months and 3 weeks as hunter-gatherers. So if the whole human existence was marked in a 1-year time period, 11 months and 3 weeks, that's how long we were hunter-gatherers, right? That's how long we lived in communal environments. And then, using that timeline, in terms of agricultural economies, right? The agricultural economy, pretty much that was like 5 days in a 1 year time period. So the point is that the most amount of time we've been on the planet has been communal, but we also had agricultural economies. Some of those agricultural economies were subsistence level, right? But some of the critical agricultural economies, particularly when we talked about the Black American slave economy, is that it was agricultural. Okay, so when we look if you look on page 40, right, we have the feudal political economy, right? So this was really one of the first, the slave political economy, right? And this was a class system, okay? So for whatever reason, some people perceive themselves as superior to other people, right? So it was a class system. You had the slave master and you had the slaves, right? And so the way that political economy, the people socially reproduced, they socially reproduced that method, okay, of being slaves and slave masters, okay? And then, so that was the political economy, but the economy was agricultural, okay? So the question there, in a slave political economy and an agricultural economy, how did you get the workers, right? Again, not working for wages, but how did you get them out of their houses to work in the fields in a slave political economy?
They're losing family.
Yes?
Sorry to cut you off, Sayer. Amani said that they're static. I think it's coming from misspells. If you could mute your iPad, I think.
Okay, gotcha.
Okay.
Okay.
Sorry about that. Sorry
Okay.
to cut you off, Sayer.
Okay, so go ahead, Zaire.
I said it was fear.
Yeah, it was fear and intimidation. So, some people would say, wage labor is slavery, what we're dealing with today, but it's not really slavery. I mean, there might be a sense of exploitation in the modern day capitalist wage labor economy, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes, but in a slave political economy, right, when people were owned as chattel slavery, right, it was fear and intimidation that got you out of your bed and you were forced into the field. And the distributional mechanism was that everything that was produced was owned by the slave master, okay? And then the slave master would distribute a little bit here, a little bit there to the slaves. And that economic system continued, and continued until when? What do you think would lead to the end of that system? What do you think, Mr. Suarez? Lieutenant?
I don't know.
What's the question again? I'm sorry.
So, slavery ended, right? And so how, a lot of people would say, especially the black slavery, right, that it was the, Lincoln and the North freed slaves. But was that the only thing that freed the slaves? Did the slaves free themselves too? Well, of course, the slaves did free themselves, right? They played a key role in their own liberation, right? I mean, because there's only so far that you can go where you have almost like 100% exploitation. I mean, that was the nature of slavery, right? The nature of slavery was the total political economy was under control of the slave master. The reproductive rights was under control of the slave master. The fact that you had to go in the field, that was under control of the slave master. The amount of time you worked in the field was under the control of the slave master. What you received in return for your labor, that was under control of the slave master. And the wealth that was accumulated, that belonged to the slave master. I mean, that was like almost 100% exploitation. And at some point, right, that level of exploitation, the through efforts of independence and self-determination, of course, the U.S. North and Lincoln did play a role, but the slaves played a key role in liberating themselves also. Okay, so again, what I want to stress, right, is that over the history, and again, we know that like one of the slaves, the slave political economy foremost in our mind today is the kind that where we had Africans who were taken, by and large, they were communal people, taken from the African continent, right, enslaved against their will, and forced to work in another world, right, in a world that they were not familiar with, right, and so that process, right, that was very detrimental. Like I said, some people would say that on the African continent, like up to a third of the population was decimated by it. Okay, so the way I'm breaking this down, this way of analyzing political economy and economics was the format that I learned through the work of Lloyd Hogan and his idea of black political economy. Okay, and then after slavery, right, we have another kind of political economy, which is the feudal political economy, also agriculture, right, and the feudal political economy is not quite the same as the slave political economy, because
it wasn't just for the kids understanding feudalism. We're talking about European feudalism.
Yep, we're talking about European feudalism, but the sharecropping South was also a feudal. It was also a feudal economy, right. And the theory of it, right? So I mean, this was the dilemma of Black Americans who freed themselves and were freed in 1863, and the war in the Civil War being over in 1865, right? That they were freed from slavery, but they found themselves in another political economy of exploitation, not quite as bad as slavery, but significant in its exploitation. So here again, the social reproduction associated with it was now you worked on the land, no longer the slave master, but the landlord. And that was true. I mean, the point is that this idea of feudal existence, I mean, that was all over the planet. Truth of the matter is that we did mention last time that we all can trace our roots back to the African continent, but the truth of the matter is that if we go back far enough in any of our histories, you are going to find slavery, right? Whether it was the Vikings or whether it was the Romans, whether it was the Aztecs or the Mayans, right? I mean, even on the African continent, there were slave economies. The U.S. slavery was particularly brutal. The Brazilian slavery, the Caribbean slavery was particularly brutal, right? Especially in their relationship to the upcoming system of capitalism. But the feudalism, right, and this was one of the contributions of Lloyd Hogan, is that he was able to compare sharecropping in the U.S. South to a feudal economy, right? And that the feudalism, that was kind of like, what was the relationship, right? You had freedom, right, in terms of your house where you lived, right? But what was the social contract with regard to the distributional mechanisms? So the land was treated communal. You were allowed to work the land, but the social contract was like 50-50, right? The landlord would get 50% of what was produced, and the serf, right, or the sharecropper would get 50%. Now, the thing about that 50-50 was that it really wasn't 50-50, right? A lot of times, you would have to go to company stores, right? And you'd pay exorbitant prices for tools and equipment, unfair prices for your product. So, I mean, it wasn't really a 50-50 deal. And then if you think of 50-50, right, if you have, 1,000 sharecroppers, giving 50% of their crop to the landlord, the landlord has 1,000 shares of 50% of everybody's crop, and the sharecropper only has half of what they produce, and they have to survive off of that, and they get ripped off on a portion of that, so they might have to survive off of 30% of what they produce. But the landlord gets, 1,000 shares of 50%, right? Which,
Dr. Haynes, do
yep.
you think you could say that slavery was more of a physical enslavement, whereas this feudalism is more of an economic enslavement, tricking the sharecroppers to constantly be in debt to them? So yes, there wasn't the physical manifestation in terms of like the physical brutality, but the feudalism was economic type of enslavement.
Well, I mean, you could say that, but I mean, the sharecropping system in the U.S. South was very physical. I mean, that's you were freed from slavery, but right after slavery, at the turn of the century, in 1900s, right, you had huge amounts of lynchings, right, fear and intimidation. That's very physical. As a matter of fact, right, it was that lifestyle that led to a lot of migrations from the U.S. South. It was kind of a push-pull process. So after the freedom from the slave system in the U.S. South, the slaves found themselves free, but free, again, one of the original contracts was, they were supposed to get 40 acres and a mule. Well, that never happened, right? They didn't get the huge amount of ownership. So they found themselves in a new form of exploitation, but it was also very physical, right? And it was just very intense in terms of
Segregation too. They're physically separated too.
right. You had the Jim Crow laws, the black codes. I mean, it made it very very terrible. So in part, why there's so many African Americans in Buffalo, for example, or in Chicago, right? I mean, there was this huge migration out of the South because of the exploitation was untenable, right? It was unbearable, right? But then also so that was the push part. The pull part, like if you remember in your history classes, people like Henry Ford was talking about, come work for us in Detroit, right, Flint, Michigan, and places like that, $5 a day. So you're a sharecropper. You're not really making any significant money, right? You don't like the level of exploitation you're experiencing. So the pull part was, okay, $5 a day. Well, you today, $5 a day means that's not significant at all. But in the 1900s, that $5 a day was you could raise a family off of that. Okay, so again, but the level of exploitation compared to slavery. Matter of fact, probably the closest the way we can interpret modern day slavery to get a feel for what what it was really like is think about the prison system. Okay, today's prison system. Right. So in today's prison system, right. So one thing about our political economy, there's 5 key areas. Right. So in today's prison system, right, in terms of your ability to socially reproduce, that's controlled by the warden. Right. You can only have a certain amount of conjugal visits. Okay. What time you get up in the morning, that's controlled by the warden. How do you work? Right, what you get paid. I mean, you get paid pennies on a dollar. That's controlled by the prison system. What you produce is controlled by the prison system. What you get back in return is controlled by the prison system, and you don't get the wealth that you produced. So that's like a complete lockdown, right? So like even today, so people might say that this system is, this capitalist economy is a form of slavery, but it's really not, right? Matter of fact, it's like if there's some corner boys out there, working those corners, right? the truth is that, you know, physically they are free, but it's a constrained freedom, right? I mean, like I see corner boys right outside the door here, right? And what do I mean? Yeah, they are free, but that freedom is constrained, right? Because they don't have the opportunities to get those good jobs, because they don't have the education, they don't have institutional racism, right? It just makes it very difficult for somebody to get a decent kind of employment today. Yes, sir.
Vernice Turner, on Facebook commented, "Yes and amen. Proper education brings about divine manifestations."
Oh, no doubt. Thank you. Yeah. I mean, and that's, so let me follow up on that, the divine manifestations, right? So, and this could put us closer to where I want to go anyways, is that, you know, we could go through, and maybe we'll talk a little bit more, but let me hit up on this divine manifestation, because this is really significant to why Black political economy is significant to not only understanding where we're at today in the 21st century, right, but also providing solutions. Okay, one thing that Black political economy did for me, right, compared to mainstream economics, it shifted the analysis away from production and distribution of goods and services to the human being, right? Who do we become in the process? Okay, what kind of human beings do we become? What level of character do we develop, right? Whereas typical economics focused on, you know, the production and distribution of goods and services. What Lloyd Hogan's Black political economy allowed me to do is shift the emphasis. Okay, so now, you know, if you see the title of the book, right, The Journey of Economic and Spiritual Man, right, is that this idea of scarcity, economic scarcity, that really dominated much of the world, right, over the last few centuries, right? But now we're in the 21st century, and the truth is we're not really in a world of scarcity, right? If right now there is enough for everybody on the planet, there's enough food, there's enough to create socially acceptable standards of living for all human beings on the planet. Our problem right now is distribution. Okay, so coming back to the significance of our analysis today is that right now we're in a capitalist political economy, right? And like I said, in this capitalist economy, if you don't, in the industrial age, right, the economics of the industrial age, right, in the 1930s, 40s, and 50s, you could be a elementary school dropout or a high school dropout, and you could get a job at Bethlehem Steel or General Motors. Today, in the 21st century, being an elementary school or a high school dropout, right, no, you're pretty well screwed, right? It's very difficult. And what I've noticed, right, a lot of times, right, if you don't have that skill base, right, going back into the hoods, right, who's going to give you jobs, right? The drug dealers, right? They're the ones who give you the jobs, right? And those jobs are very dangerous for the individuals, dangerous for the community, right? And that lifestyle is a very difficult lifestyle. But so as we move forward, as we'll talk a little bit more about capitalism in our next class, maybe next Monday or maybe even our next podcast, right? But right now, you, young men and women, right? What we focus on today is the idea of personal productivity, okay? So mainstream economics focuses on the production and distribution of goods and services and how we produce goods and services. But today in our analysis, what is going to be relevant to you is your personal productivity. Now, what is personal productivity? Personal productivity is the degree and quantity of significant accomplishments attained in a particular time period that reflect your dreams, your goals, your desires, and your aspirations. Okay? So how are you, what are you doing today with regard to manifesting your dreams, right? What are you doing today to manifesting your goals, your desires, and your aspirations? When it comes to personal productivity, like we could break it down, right? I mean, a lot of us, you know, we are. It's kind of like, you know, we're just dancing through life. We're not even thinking about personal productivity, right? Let's see here. I got a section on here, right? So when it comes to on page 50, right? When it comes to personal productivity, right? Some of us are just drifters, right? That we're just drifting through life, right? We go with the flow, right? Takes things as they come, but we don't really put any real life into our dreams, right? And you could do that at your teenage life, but if you keep on that lifestyle up until your 20s, your 30s, your 50s, right? I mean, well, you know what? You know, a lot of times what happens, instead of continuing to dream, people start forgetting about their dreams. You know, one of the problems that we face today is, like, you know, as we get older, people say, grow up, forget about the dreams, because you gotta earn a living. You gotta start working for money.
They like to say, be realistic.
Be realistic, right? I mean, so a lot of times we're being forced to not be thinking about our dreams. Some people are pursuers, right? When it comes to their goals, their desires, their dreams, and aspirations, that they pursue them, right? But then, you know, I've experienced this at college, at Buffalo State College. A lot of times at the beginning of the semester, I would hear a student like, "Yo, Dr. Haynes, right? You know, I'm looking to get an A, right? You know, that's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna get an A." So I see them, I'm like, "Yo, that's cool. Go ahead and get this A, right?" You know, but then, you know, 4 or 5 weeks into the semester, like, "Yo, Dr. Haynes, you know," like, "Yeah, I might be getting a B, right?" And then near the end of the semester, like, "Yo, Doc, man, I'm trying to pass," okay? Or they might say, you know, they might come in and they're studying engineering or physics. And then what they realize is that how difficult it is, they don't want to, you know, it's difficult for them to pursue that. So they realize how difficult and how hard it is, they move on to something else. Then you got the achievers, right? When it comes to personal productivity. And a lot of times the achievers are the people who their position is, if you want something, I mean, I guess you guys know about, if you want something done right, you do what?
Do it yourself.
You do it yourself, right? Those are the achievers, right? But then the problem with the achievers, right, in moving into the 21st century, right, is that really moving into the 21st century is a period of team building. You know, if we're going to build products and services that respond to the growth, to the greatest good, to the greatest number, a lot of times that takes teams, right? And so really, that's the realm of this super achiever, right? And so my desire for you, the young men and women in this class, right, is try to figure out how to become super achievers, right? Like I said, you know, the conversation right now, 50 million people are unemployed. We're dealing with this pandemic. I mean, there's just a lot of drama in today's life, right? But at some point, you know, some of you and some of us are going to have to figure out how to build institutions, build businesses that could provide for our communities and provide for the aspirations and needs of society as a whole. Okay, so going back to this idea of this divine
manifestation.
Divine manifestation, right? We are in a capitalist political economy right now, but we've transitioned out of the industrial age, at least here in the United States. We're in the knowledge age and the information age. People get paid to think, right? So the most important product of the 21st century is the human being, you and me. We are the most important products of this time period, right? And so recognizing that, right, what's going to be critical is what do we consume, right? Whether it's food, again, we talked about, if we're to survive, we have to consume food. But what other things that can we consume, right? Have you ever heard? Let me ask the class, or you, Lieutenant, right? Garbage in and garbage out.
Absolutely.
Okay. So class, or if you want to speak to it, what do you think? Garbage in and garbage out.
Garbage in is if you consume garbage.
Yeah.
That's what's going to be the result of that. Will be the output will be garbage as well.
Yeah. So class, what do you hear when we talk about garbage in, garbage out? Like if you take a class, if you take a 14-week class, and you're studying economics or philosophy or something to build yourself up, to make yourself a more productive human being. And I don't mean necessarily productive in terms of earning an income, but productive as in a higher level of character, right? But if you're listening to Jerry Springer, right, and all the drama that's on the news, or all the drama, right, and you listen to that for 14 weeks, you're going to be an expert in that material, but that's not really leveling up, okay? So we need to be very careful with regard to what we consume. What we consume both physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, because if we consume physically garbage, if we consume mentally garbage, if we consume emotionally garbage, if we consume spiritually garbage, right, we're not going to level up, right? So in terms of, listen, you young men and women, we're handing this world over to you, right? And and so this conversation that I'm having with you right now, again, this is the language that came out of my study in Black political economy, and this is really not the kind of language that comes out of mainstream traditional economics. Okay, all right. So the question of garbage in, garbage out, what does it mean to me? Well, I know that, like food, right? If like I have a habit of eating junk food, right? And when I eat junk food, my body,
You feel like junk.
I feel like junk. My body looks like junk. I feel like junk. I feel lethargic, right? So that's part of, so on the physical level, that's garbage in and garbage out, right? Emotionally, right? If my emotions are going all over the place, then I could get upset real easily because somebody triggers me, right? Because I don't have a level of self-awareness and self-confidence, right? And I get hot easily, right? Well, I know that, a higher level of emotional development is that I practice a level of discipline of self-reliance, right? That, people might try to push me off my center, right? Or I have experiences, I access information and media, right? Dealing with other human beings. We all know about haters, right? They might want to push you off the center, right? But if you've consumed and developed a strong emotional fortitude, right, you're not going to be knocked off. But you're not really born with a strong emotional fortitude. That is developed. But you're also not born with an emotion that where you get hot and upset and angry, or you're filled with hatred or what have you. That also is something that is learned. Okay. And if you are filled with fear, doubt, indecision, right, that's probably because you're off-centered in a particular way. Mentally, right, if I fill my mind with a bunch of junk, right, that is not uplifting to myself or the people around me, right, that's what I perceive as garbage in and garbage out. And spiritually, right, if I'm doing things that are detrimental to me as a human being, are detrimental to my family, or are detrimental to my community, I don't feel good about myself, right? That pulls the community down. So that's kind of what I mean by garbage in and garbage out. Okay.
When you speak of like realigning or centering yourself, can you elaborate on that?
Well, like I know, right, that I've been on the planet for quite a while, right? And in my teenage life, right, I was very sensitive to what other people said about me or what they thought about me, right? And that manifested in insecurities about myself, okay? But as I developed, right, as a human being, as I came into contact with mentors and people who were like, look, don't worry about what people say about you, right? Don't worry about this. And as a matter of fact, the more you're clear about your dreams, your goals, your desires, and how to turn those into reality, the less you're going to care about what other people say, right? So as I practiced that more and more, I got better and better at that. And I'm still working on it, right? I mean, because I do care about what people say. But at the same time, as long as I know that I'm motivated with doing the greatest good for the greatest number, or doing unto others as how I would want them to do unto me, my heart and my spirit kind of tells me that's a good way to walk the planet. All right, so any other questions? Let's see what we got here. So that was like 40 years ago, times changed. What do you mean?
They're referring to the assignments on Schoology. I posted one on Thursday of last week. I guess that's 40
Okay.
years ago.
Yeah, so I didn't give you an assignment. I was kind of a little bit under the weather these last couple of days, right? But after today's class, I think we're on assignment number 6, correct?
I've only posted 3 assignments.
Okay.
So it's assignment number 4.
All right. Okay. So let me give you. So I got 2 more. So after this class, I'll give you those assignments also. All right. So let's have some conversation from the class. What did you hear, and what do you think about what you heard?
They're all worried about assignments now. I mean, the last 10 comments.
Okay. All right. So you'll get the assignments, right? Don't worry about the assignments. We'll be reviewing. The main thing is you're taking notes, right? I want you to be taking notes on what we're doing in this class, and we'll take care of those assignments when we can.
I think that's a kind of a good lesson that you're trying to have a discussion with them, but the fear of them not turning in an assignment is so ingrained in them that it's hard to focus on the discussion at hand. That's just how strong the fear and the worry is. All
right. So let me speak to that. So again, as I told the class earlier, right? Again, this is the methodology of this class. It's not necessarily the methodology of other college courses that you might experience, right? But we start with an A, right? And the only way you don't get an A in this class is if you work your way out of an A, right? So I don't want you to be fearful, but I do want, so I'm not saying that you're going to get a gift as an A, right? Because at the same time, right, as I say we start with an A, I want from you something over and beyond my expectation. Over and beyond Mr. Perla's expectation, over and beyond Mrs. Phelps' expectation, over and beyond your own expectation, right? This is the 21st century. We definitely are in the era of leveling up, right? So yeah, don't as can we say this on the air? Your mantra.
Yes, absolutely.
All right, so go ahead. Tell them a little bit about. So right now we want to deal with fear. I want Lieutenant Suarez to talk a little bit about his own mantra with regards to this issue of fear.
Yeah, the reason why I bring fear up, and it always jumps out to me, my own personal mantra is fuck fear. I literally have a clothing brand called Fuck Fear, and I have no fear, no regrets tattooed on my stomach. So fear for me is an important topic, and I like to get to the root of people's fears, because it really jumped out to me that you guys, he said the last 10 comments were about these assignments, and trying to get away from teaching or get out of a paradigm of scarcity, lack, fear, poverty, and move into one of abundance and love and all those synonyms for that, it's just really important for me to bring up, why are you so afraid?
That you're kind of worried about the assignments, and I just wanted to share that his concepts, because again, 21st century, this is not the century for fear, right? I know there's a lot of pressure to be afraid. I mean, you turn on the news every day, right? They got us being fearful, right? But no, we got to level up. We can't afford to be fearful, right? Some people say love conquers all. And so is love an economic concept? Well, old school economics of scarcity, love is not an economic concept. But new school economics of abundance, economics of prosperity, definitely love is a concept, right? I mean, it's like if you love your customers, you're going to give them a quality product or a quality service, right? If you love yourself, right, people are going to be able to tell that you love yourself. So transitioning from old school economics of scarcity, where you got to be afraid. I mean, what does scarcity lead to? Scarcity leads to huge amounts of competition, and the extreme level of scarcity is warfare, right? It's like, okay, there's not enough, so I'm going to take from you, right? I mean, this whole era of imperialism, right, was a function of this idea of scarcity. That's not enough, right? There's not enough for me to have what I want and you to have what I want. But I would say in the 21st century, right? I mean, it's not to say that we don't have to be efficient, right? That we, when we have resources, that we have to be efficient with our resources. But the potential. Again, think about it. What's going, as I mentioned before, everything around us, everything that's made by a human being, first started out in the minds of a man or a woman, right? So when it comes to your thinking process, you have a monopoly. Nobody else thinks like you, right? And that's what we want to tap into, right? The fact that nobody else thinks like you, and this new economics of prosperity and abundance, the idea is let's tap into that. How do we, instead of like thinking about how we're going to compete with somebody else, how do we get that which is in your mind and convert it into something that is material, that's productive for society as a whole? Okay. All right. Any other questions? All right. So we got about 4 minutes. What do we want to talk about, sir?
I think that was good.
I had asked the question.
Okay. Go ahead. Sorry.
And I said how? Because I'm so confused. So basically, he got 3 assignments posted on school, right? Okay. And then we show you all of our assignments on one day.
Well, no, yes. On Tuesday, I just want to see that you have written in your workbooks, and we're just going to look at them, right? And then that would be the main thing. But what's key is the majority of what's going to happen with your grade is that you participate. Right? So if you're taking this class and you're not participating or you're not showing up, right, the majority of the grade is going to be attendance. So if we look at your workbooks on Tuesday, and Mr. Perla and Ms. Phelps, we see that you have done your due diligence in doing those assignments, right? We're good, right? You'll get your A.
Andre said on the opposite side of fear is the life we want to live.
Okay.
That was a Facebook comment. Thank you, Dre.
Yeah, thank you, Dre. That's right. And it's the life we want to live. And on the opposite side, we build the road as we travel, right? So that's what we're doing, like even for myself, right? The fact that we're doing a podcast, on my level, for me, that's leveling up. I mean, here we are doing, this time last year, we were over at Bennett High School face to face. And that was just a whole different kind of education and different kind of learning. But today, you know, we're doing online learning. So my goal is to develop a creative kind of learning, right? Where, you know, that you don't get bored, right? And that we can take advantage of this technology, right? So part of it, again, me doing my lectures, but doing the podcast. That's me leveling up, right? So I'm demonstrating leveling up. And so, you know, if I could do it, you can do it.
Catherine Alexander says hello.
Hey, Catherine.
Thanks for joining, Catherine.
Yeah. Okay. Yes, someone said he isn't going to give you a bad grade. That's true. You just keep working with me. You keep the faith, believe in yourself, have confidence in yourself, be self-conscious, develop a sense of curiosity, develop a sense of critical thinking, develop a sense of creative thinking, develop a sense of constructive thinking. If you walk out of my class with those ways of thinking, you should be fine and you'll be able to get your A.
Monique Morales says hello.
Hey, Monique.
Thanks for joining, Monique.
Yeah, and I get the confusion, right? We're in a this is unprecedented. Having to teach a class, like, can you show the screen right there? Like having to teach a class like this, right? And right, you know, that's kind of hard to do. I'm looking at names. You know, it's hard to interact with people in this way. So yes, I get it that it's confusing, and that's why I'm going to be real liberal with regard to the grading, because I'm learning by doing, right? But I'm not afraid. I don't have fear, right? I know that I'm responding to the conditions. I'm responding to the cards I've dealt with, right? And I want you to be able to respond to the cards that you've been dealt with also. So yes, you're confused, but the bottom line is we're trying to make this the best quality education that we could get during the circumstances. And if we continue, if this is to be the norm of 21st century education, there's no doubt in my mind that, again, this was the first time ever that I had to teach this way, right? So I'm quite sure if this becomes the norm, the quality of this kind of education is going to get better and better. So you're the pilot class, you're the first class with me and you doing this kind of education. But if this doesn't become the norm, every time we do it or I do it, the course will become a better course for real.
Let's all level up together.
Okay, so let's all level up together. If there's no more questions, we could call it a day, class.
So no assignments today?
Okay, later on, I'm going to pass on the assignments to Mr. Perla, right? And we'll straighten this out. But I would say if you've only had 3 assignments so far, I'm not going to pile a lot of them on the end to you, right? So I will coordinate with Mr. Perla the assignments, okay?
I'm still doing mine.
All right. All right, folks. Talk to you tomorrow. Tomorrow will be a discussion. So I did a lot of talking today. Tomorrow you'll be doing a lot of talking. Take care.
Yeah, man.
Okay, hear us. We good? Bye. Okay. We off here?